Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Toby Eunice with the Gypsy's Kiss. We've got a great panel for you tonight. We're going to talk about the clues that aren't in the poem. Stay with us. All right. For those of you already in the chat room, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. So the plan for tonight is to discuss some of the clues that aren't in the poem. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to ask Sean to recite or repeat a question that Fenn Treasure Hunter got from Forrest about a month ago. And I don't remember it precisely, but I know that Sean does. But before that, we're going to go for about an hour. I'm going to give the panelists the opportunity to express their own opinions on the matter of what the clues outside the poem are. You may have already seen the show that we did yesterday that Shelley and I did in our regular vlog, where we talked about the 9 clues that we identified that we don't think that are in the poem. And we saw some areas of commonality in the ones that we saw, that we picked out. And the first is they tend to be less of a riddle than the ones than the clues in the poem. The second thing is that there seems to be some sort of numeric precision in the majority of them, and we think that's actually a benefit, because it's always good to have less of a riddle and more precision in the clues that you're implementing in terms of your respective theoretical solutions. So I'm going to talk about those. I'll move it along and make sure that each of the panelists get the opportunity to express their opinions on these different matters. And then, of course, we'll do follow-up questions. Shelley is producing in the chat room. So if you have any questions in the chat room, ask them. Make sure you precede your question with an @ a Gypsy's Kiss. And if you just start typing @ space, the name A Gypsy's Kiss will pop up, select it, and when Shelley sees it, it will be highlighted, and we can make sure your question gets answered. As an option, although I don't have the call-in line open tonight, I do have the 1-800 text open tonight. So if you want to text me a message at 1-800-947-1043, and the number will keep scrolling by in our image below the Zoom image here. That's 1-800-947-1043. Text me a message, and I'll make sure that the the panel gets the question. Remember to include your name and the state in which you live, so that we can inform people where it's coming from. Okay, so here we go. Let's start by making introductions, and I'm going to start with our friend from the UK, so that we're going to keep him awake. It's 2 o'clock in the morning now, Jonna?
It's 2 o'clock. Yeah.
Let's start with introductions there, and tell people where they can find you on the interwebs.
I'm Jono Jones. Yep, I'm from the UK. I'm known as Brit Chaser on YouTube and on Hint of Riches. And yep, if you have a look on YouTube, Brit Chaser, there's one video up there at the minute, and more coming soon.
Good. It was a great video. It was very well done. Sean Martinez.
Sean Martinez. I am from New Mexico. I am a retired homicide detective. You can find me at Figuring Out Forrest on YouTube, Facebook, or figuringoutforrest@gmail.com.
Jason Michael.
Hi, I'm Jason. I'm a metalsmith, a member of AGK. You can find my work on NewMexicoTimWork.com.
And last but not least, Shelley Kearney.
And I'm Shelley Kearney with A Gypsy's Kiss, and also I have my own channel, The Softer Side, and Toby and I will be on tomorrow night, 7:00 p.m. live to talk to you and answer your questions.
Great. And we are doing the open call line tomorrow on The Softer Side.
Yes,
that should be fun.
As long as you get the right phone number out there.
Yeah, my fault. Still deserve to be beat up for that. Yeah. So I will tell you about A Gypsy's Kiss the rest of the week. At the end of today's program, we're going till around 8 o'clock tonight. All right. So here's what I want to do. I want to give everybody, if you watched our video, you know where we stand on these matters of clues that aren't in the poem. And I'm hesitant to call them clues, because to me, they're just additional intelligence. And and I combine that intelligence with the other intelligence that we've collected from the poem, from the book, and then I determine whether or not it's actionable, whether or not we can actually use that intelligence and incorporate it. So I'm going to ask these guys the same questions, and we'll start with just one of them to get a feel for it, right? So I'm going to ask each of them, tell me what you think is a clue, but it's not in the poem. Could be in the book, could be in the other books, could be in the scrapbooks, but you've identified a clue. And tell me two other things, why you think it's a clue and how you've incorporated it into your solution. Okay? So, Jonathan, you're up.
Cool. I've got a few clues lined up, which I can go through over the evening, that tend to be the lesser used or not quoted at all type quotes. So there'll be other examples. The first one is, I don't think you can find it on Tarry Scan. It's from a BBC Science documentary, which I think was in 2014. And there's a particular part where you hear Forrest talk, and it's not quite clear between the following paragraphs whether or not they've cut this in this way or whether it's a flow. I'll read it out and tell you what I think. So it's around the 200 feet, 500 feet mark, and there's lots of well-quoted examples on Terry Scamp, but you don't hear this one a lot.
Let me make sure. So this was a BBC program, is that correct?
Yeah, it was for BBC World Service, so it should have been around the globe. This one.
All right.
So this is Forrest speaking. There have been a few people within 500 feet. I think there have been people within a couple of 100 feet, and that's where they break to him, and you can see him, but it sounds as if it's in flow. They figure the first two clues, but they don't get the third and the fourth, and they go right past the treasure chest. So that's word for word what he says there. Now that to me either implies, if they haven't edited that in a certain way, that the second clue is either 200 feet from the treasure chest, or the journey you go on in getting it wrong from the second, trying to find the third and fourth, takes you to a point where the closest point is 200. Now, to me, that's on the assumption they haven't edited that in a certain way. But that's my first one.
So how did you incorporate that into the solution that you and your family were on when you were in Yellowstone this last month?
So combining that with other clues, I guess, in terms of the timing, it was done in an afternoon. I think I haven't got the exact information, but he talked about it being a few miles in total, going there and back to his car. So to me, it suggests that the area is quite small, and getting a feel for what 200 feet is, that's to the end of our road here. And that's really short, and and without looking at that, you don't realize how short that is. But yeah, I think that it indicates to me that the area is likely quite a small area.
So 2/3 of an American football field. But I wanted to say to the other panelists, if you also want to add your questions about what Jonathan said, please feel free to question each other so that we can keep the dialogue going. Okay. And I didn't tell you that before, so let me ask you now. Sean, do you have any questions of Jonathan on that particular clue?
Not specifically a question, a comment, perhaps. I do agree with the searchers being within 200 feet as being a clue. That is not in the book, but something that Forrest has given us since then. My own particular solve, how that has assisted me viewing that as a clue as I'm processing my solution. I've narrowed down my blaze location to be approximately 200 to 500 feet from my home of Brown. And so that has assisted me in that, because I have a number to work with now. If they're getting clue 1 and clue 2 correct, but going past the rest, then home of Brown isn't very far away from that, in my opinion. And it's assisted me in putting together my solution that way. So essentially, one of my solution locations has my blaze within, I believe it's between 200 and 500 feet
Yeah.
from my home of brown location.
Jason Michael, do you have a follow-up question for Jonathan?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I do want to mention that we have been, as we started evaluating the commentary about 200 feet versus 500 feet, et cetera, we headed in the same direction as what Jonathan indicates and what Sean indicates, and we ended up referring to it, and we didn't actually name it this way. I didn't start using this definition until I saw it on Dale's blog about a month ago, where he used the phrase small scale. He used the word solve. I don't use the word solve. His small scale solution. But we have been implementing small scale solutions this entire season because we're starting to realize that it just doesn't make any sense to us any other way. So I'm going to try and standardize on that for a small scale solution that doesn't involve driving, miles. It's a walk, right? It might be a mile walk or a 2 mile walk or a 500-foot walk, but it's a walk. Jason Michael? Tell me a clue that you've identified that's outside the context of the poem.
Well, you pretty well just covered everything I was going to talk about.
Okay, then we'll go ahead. You have your own opinions on these matters.
Well, as far as what stood out to me, I think, going into this originally, I really felt I was maybe not in the classic sense, but essentially a poem purist. I didn't want to track down too much extraneous information. And I know I've talked about this on other panels where I just said there's a lot of white noise out of that. Sean and I have talked about that at length, and just essentially avoiding that. So the ones that did stand out to me, there was a couple. The one where he says that there's a word that is key, that one really stood out to me because it was the first time I really heard from his own mouth the suggestion that there might be a little more puzzle to the poem than first suggested. To a lot of the poem purists, it was literally like read through it step by step, and each clue essentially translates to a next step in the map. But when he said that, people are missing focus on a word that was key, it really suggested that there might be a little more to it than that. It may not be as straightforward as literally transfer those words into geographic locations and follow that map. So that was kind of mind-opening for me, and kind of reset the way I look at it. And I don't consider myself a poem purist anymore, partially because of that. I've certainly opened up to hearing other people's solves, which I didn't even mess with before, and B, the idea that some of this extraneous information, if well vetted, and I think that's very important, you've got to use your own intelligence to determine the value, and also some really basic investigative ideas, like just what is my source? When you're looking at these videos, ask yourself, is that the secondhand version of what he remembered, he thought he heard on another person's blog? Because that's not a great source. But if, on the other hand, you're hearing a quote direct from Fenn's mouth during an interview, hey, that's pretty solid. So you can put different kind of weight on that. So I think it's very important to go through that process. The other one was the comment about the folks that had got the first two clues right and then walked on past the treasure. Again, this is kind of reiterating what you just said, but that was the first time where I stopped looking at map size solutions, because I realized if you can do that, then there's no way that I'm looking at, Brown's Canyon up 10 miles up the road. Hey, look, I've got where Worms Waters Hole just down here. There's a tributary, and that's 7 miles that way. And there was driving involved in some of these solves, and some of these that I was looking up in the way of maps, and Meek was like an area where this guy had been.
Right. Yeah.
That was this far-flung area and all this. And when he said that, I realized, wow, this could be a lot tighter. And honestly, it makes sense because if you did want it to last the test of time, geographically, if the clues are essentially in a very tight area, it minimizes the chance of any one step being obliterated over time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Sean Martinez, I'm going to come to you with the question that I asked the others.
Sure.
But before I do that, I wanted to ask you to recite that quote that Fenn had sent to Fenn Treasure Hunters about a month ago, and you were on that show. Could you recite that again?
And this is, I'm pulling it from Fenn Treasure Hunters Facebook page. Jason Dent posted it on the 24th. And he states, Forrest has said, quote, "There is one good clue searchers could think of themselves, but haven't," end quote. Signed F.
All right. So we'll come back to that in just a second, and I do want to come back to you, Sean. But Jonathan, before I forget, could you do me a favor and either post that quote into the chat room so that, if you don't mind, the one that you described from the BBC, or send me a link to the BBC programming so that I can share it in the description box below.
Absolutely.
Okay, so everybody else can have it as well. Because that's, not only is it a new one in terms of what we've heard, but interestingly, it's slightly different. So there's some very British nuances in there, and I'd be interested in analyzing them just a little bit further. Okay, back to you, Sean. So let's go back to give me a clue that you think you've discovered outside the poem, why you think it's a clue, and how you incorporated that into your solution.
Well, I believe that there is and I like viewing it the way that you've previously stated, Toby. Hints and clues, which are which. Mm-hmm. You have this conflict. Some may have more weight than others, but reading through The Thrill of the Chase over and over again, and following Forrest's instruction to do so, looking for hints that may be scattered throughout. I believe that when he refers to utilizing your senses, and I believe it's when the children are at his gallery, and he's talking about the different senses. What I've pulled from that in my own solution locations is that it's going to be more than just sight and touch. I believe you need to pay attention to what you hear. Mm-hmm. You need to pay attention to what you smell, and he kind of hints about those things along the way. That's something that I have put a lot of weight into as a clue for me, because if I'm boots on the ground and I'm out there in the field, I'm not just looking quickly down, as a lot of people do. They get to their blaze location, they look quickly down, and then, there's 1,000 places to look quickly down.
Right.
But if you're utilizing your other senses and following those while in the field, I believe that was a really big clue for me that I took out of reading through the book. And I've actually used that myself while out in the field, and it's been very beneficial. And I've picked up on things that I wouldn't otherwise if I did not read the book. There's some that just stick strictly to the poem, but I can tell you from my own personal experience, just boots on the ground, and the areas, the hints or clues that I've pulled out of the book have assisted me while in my search areas. So that's just something that really stood out to me.
So it's only fair that I do the same thing. Now, I'm basically going to repeat what you guys have already seen in our Tuesday show. But before I do that, because you mentioned it, Sean, and I think Jason mentioned it as well, I wrote a blog post on gypsyskiss.com today, and it's entitled "The Never-Ending Debate Over the Differences Between Hints and Clues." And basically the point that I was trying to make is that in my career in the intelligence community, I don't ever recall a conversation where we debated definitions like hints and clues. we needed to know two things on the intelligence that was incoming. Number one, was it credible? And credibility is defined in two ways. Is the source reliable, and is the information reliable? And then the second thing we needed to know was whether or not it was actionable. And so if you apply that to the hunt for Fenn's treasure, you have to make those distinctions between credible intelligence and incredible intelligence, and actionable intelligence and inactionable intelligence. And both those conditions need to be true before you incorporate that into the solution. And what I'm trying to get around is this infinitesimally long debate about the differences between hints and clues. In our opinion, it's all intelligence. The only decision that you have to make is whether it's credible intelligence, and then if it's credible, whether it's actionable intelligence. And what I mean by actionable intelligence, that you have enough to incorporate it into your theoretical solution. So I'm going to get away from debating clues and hints. I'm going to use clues consistently because it's fair, but everything to me is intelligence, incoming, and credible. The other thing I said in the blog post, and I recommend you go read it, is that we have a big benefit for those of us in the search community, and that is we only have one credible source. And that's Forrest Fenn himself. And he's written some things and he's spoken some things, and you've got that to work with. That's credible. Now you have to analyze it in terms of, was he marketing to us? Could he set it another way, et cetera, because he is kind of a coyote trickster. But we only have to deal with one source. And what I'm going to recommend to you is that you can downgrade the level of credibility by the number of degrees, so away from Fenn. So when Douglas Preston says something, I reduce the credibility factor by 20% because he's 1 degree away separated from Fenn. If it's further than that, written by a journalist who interviewed Douglas Preston, then I downgrade it by another 20%. So our big advantage is that we only have one source that's credible. The question is, A, is he reliable? And generally speaking, he is reliable. And B, is the information reliable? And then you can make that determination, analyze it, and put it into your solution. So I promised you that I would give, since this is a round robin kind of operation tonight, I will say to you that one of the clues that we found reliable, credible, because it came from the source and was actionable, was the one about the treasure is hidden below 10,200 feet. And the fact that the 10,200, he used that number, was very curious to me. And whenever he uses a number and it seems curious to me, that's an indication that I have to investigate it further. And so we made the transition away from looking at altitude, that the treasure was at an altitude lower than 10,200 feet, and started looking at the maps and seeing what we could find in the context of our search area, what the 10,200 feet represented. Because it struck me that he could have just as easily used 10,000 feet, but he didn't, right? It's not above 10,000 feet. It's very unlikely that it's above 9,000 feet, maybe even 8,000 feet. But he could have used the rounded number, and he chose not to. And that 10,200 feet is significant because it's it's a thicker line on your contour lines. But it also points out you can find it in almost all of your search areas. If you're in the Rocky Mountains and look on a topographic map, you'll find some 10,200s in there. And in our case, the 10,200 feet, the 3 different locations it was within our search area formed a triangle, the Bermuda Triangle of a Gypsy's Kiss. All right, Jonathan, your turn again. Give me another clue that you're willing to share, and it's outside the poem, and tell me why you think it's a clue and how you incorporate it into your solution.
Cool. I've got plenty here.
Oh,
so
good.
You tell me what to stop.
Yeah,
right.
that's why I picked you 3 guys.
The next one was it's on Dale Neitzel's site. It's from an interview that was conducted in May 2015, but was never published. I think he put it on his site early 2017. And this is really important to me, but it's full of being open to interpretation. So the reporter asked how much progress can be made by someone just thinking and searching the internet from home. Another way of saying this, how many clues can only be decoded in situ, and by that I presume he means from at home as well. And Forrest said all of them, in theory, but not likely in practice. A searcher must go to the site to find the treasure. Now, for me, you can read this in many different ways. You could say you can spot everything. It's interesting that all of them, in theory, the blaze as well. That's interesting, and maybe those last steps require you to just be there to get that and see the blaze in the right way and look down. This for me is important because I'm in the UK and I have to do all of my armchair searching. So it gives me hope, but you can read this in a very pessimistic way or a very optimistic way. But this is the only quote I can find that counters any beliefs around the responses with regards to the little girl from India.
So it sounds like it's more accepting of the possibility, and that he said it is possible, but it's not practical. Because in the little girl from India quote, he's very succinct. She can't go beyond the first two clues. But then you have to start wondering, did he mean the map? Rock map. It leads to further discussion. So you're going to have to give us a link to that one as well, Jonathan, so we can give it to everybody. I just noticed, by the way, let me take a quick commercial break here. Copper Dan is in the room, and I know that his newest piece, the one named Where Warm Waters Halt, went on sale today on eBay. So Copper Dan, you can't put links in there, but if you can tell people the easiest way to find how to find where they can buy your copper piece on eBay, okay? And a commercial. Sean Martinez, give me another one, brother.
All right. This one's been discussed, and I mean, we all really have heard about it and know about it, but however much weight you give to it individually is up to you. But the little girl from India statement that was made, I believe that that assists the searchers in understanding how much work you can actually accomplish behind your computer to a certain extent. In addition to that, I think it gives us an idea of what is accessible by a little girl in India. And if you've ever put yourself in her own shoes and tried to replicate what she would be able to accomplish to establish solving the clues. That's something that I think is a really good approach. It assists the searcher in understanding how far they can get or where to start, which is something that Forrest has really emphasized in the past. And a lot of us discussed it on the roundtable discussion number one, what or where. More often than ever, I believe, Forrest has always stated where warm waters halt. He points us back to the where. Where is important. Not necessarily what is important, but where is important. Just like he can keep his secrets where. I mean, in the very first stanza, he refers to where, and then the first clue, he utilizes the same words. So, looking at the little girl from India a little more closely, I believe will assist the search community in understanding what we're capable of doing, both with the tools we have, the internet, a really good map, and how far we can actually get, whether it's physically or just in our solution, putting it together. I think that's a really good approach, and it's a clue that has stood out to me.
Good. It sounds like a good one, and we're big fans of that particular clue. Before I get over to Jason, I want to mention a couple of things. The 1-800 text line is open, and Copper Dan, if you text me to the 1-800 text line, the eBay number of your auction. I'll say it out loud here so that people can find it easier, and that way they don't have to do a search. And Shelley, do you have any questions? I should check with you first. Do you have any questions from the chat room for us?
Well, I just have one from Paul Ammons.
Hey, Paul.
And, he's quoting Fenn, and he says, it seems like the longer one thinks about the search, the more they complicate the problem. And he wants to know, how do you interpret this?
How do I interpret the idea that the longer you spend, the more complicated? I think, interestingly enough, that it is the nature of the beast, that it is likely that the more time you spend, and I'll ask you guys the same question, that it's my opinion that the more time you spend in the chase and you don't find the treasure, it is rare that you head towards the side of simplification. You start adding things to it. Your mind starts adding things to it that does make it more complex. But I think it's a byproduct of not having the treasure. And I think what we'll do is, as we go through these winter months where we're not focused on just our solution, is look backwards, start reducing the amount of clutter that we've put into our solution that gets us back to the simple, what's in the poem, what did he say, or what as he said in the past. But I think by default, it's just the nature of the beast. You know, the more time you spend at a project and you don't solve it, the less of Occam's razor you apply, and it takes somebody coming in and pushing you in the direction of the simple solution is the best. And but you have to be reminded that, because complexity is a byproduct of the longer the time we spent. What do you think about that, Jonathan?
I agree. I mean, I came back thinking, do I just find another Where Warm Waters Halt? And if there are thousands of these, is this just a game of going through them all, which is clearly impossible? There must be something else, and the danger with that, I guess, is the something else leads to rabbit holes and the like. Saying that, I'm being open-minded about that, but that was my gut reaction. What's second to this now? Find another map. There are gonna be an awful lot of them.
Jason, what do you think?
Well, I think it's that danger of rethinking your solve and questioning every bit of it when you already put all the groundwork into your solve to begin with. So it's a real danger to start like breaking apart pieces of the puzzle. The other thing that can be a danger is I think you can forget how much a particular solve interlocks. And so you can't necessarily go through and say, you know what, I'm going to throw away that part and just start, because that can essentially break that particular solve apart. In other words, what we were talking about earlier, kind of vetting these decisions and coming up with essentially a chain, a link of directions that gets you to a particular solve. If you go in and you start messing with any one of those links, you've really kind of broken the whole solve apart. So, it's that age-old question about do you try someplace new every time you go out, or do you really, really cover a particular area well over and over again?
I'm dying to know if anybody else in the room knows if there's a scientific name for the process that Jason just described, which is if you have a solution that you're comfortable with and you remove one element of that solution, what is it called when the rest of the solution collapses? Is that a good description? There's got to be a name for that someplace in science.
I'm sure there is. I can't.
Yeah.
Science calls it chaos theory.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. The result. Yeah, that's actually it. Before I go on, Shelley, do you want to handle that super chat for us, please?
Okie dokie. We have a super chat from Alan K. And he says, anyone have any thoughts on the Philadelphia caper in My War for Me? Fun fact, Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn. Forrest's dad's name is William Fenn.
Let me come back to that, because I do want to ask Sean this same question, that of is it where are you in the relationship between the length of time you invest in searching for this treasure and adding complexity to it rather than simplifying it?
Well, if one over complexifies the solution or their angle, eventually they're going to end up with so much information if they do not filter that accordingly, and going to end up having to essentially clear off the table and go back to the drawing board. If that happens, that person who goes back to the drawing board could potentially be more successful than one who has way too much coming in, especially if a lot of that information is going down rabbit holes and it's not been confirmed intelligence, as you inferred to earlier. So, keeping, in my opinion, having plenty of information on a small scale solution size is going to be more successful than having searches that say up over 200, but are consist of over 200 locations.
Right.
I mean, if you have a different location for every search, I believe that individual's making it way too complex for themselves, and they're getting themselves further away from the treasure.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a lot of information poured into a smaller scale area or a solution location, I believe that the searcher will be a lot more successful, and it'll be a lot easier to not have to just take all that information off the table and start from square one, because you've been in the same area or few areas opposed to many, which adds more chaos to it. Now, if you pull something out of your solution, you're still safe in that area, that smaller area, because you can put it right back in.
Mm-hmm.
But just wipe it completely and start over, it could go either way depending on what information.
Got you, Jace. Jace, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, Sean, for you, stepping back from the chase as a concept and
Sure.
all the theories, and tapping into your investigatory experience, if you're building in a direction and then at some point it just becomes clear that was not correct, what was your logical process at that point to just kind of, you had to be sure that some of the facts had to be correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just didn't lead you to the right place. So
Absolutely.
it's that, I guess I'm asking, like, at that point, how do you start vetting? Okay, what were the good solid facts?
Mm-hmm.
What were my givens? And then what is
Absolutely.
the stuff that we didn't lean on right?
Mm-hmm.
At that point, what one would do from an investigative perspective is backtrack from where they've essentially come to, where they're at, and they realize this is a dead end, this isn't getting us anywhere. Well, you'll backtrack to the point where you had this one correct. You know that this information was solid, and you'll start looking at other avenues or directions from there. It's interesting you say that, because I've utilized that technique in my solution areas. If it leads me to a dead end or a brick wall, or the clues and the hints are not lining up in this area, I backtrack to what I'm pretty solid on and believe that I'm correct. It could be all the way back to the first clue. Sometimes that happens. It could be back to the second. It just depends. I believe if anybody out there had clues 3 on nailed down 100%, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
That's right.
They would have located the chest. So we're all doing that essentially in different ways, but that's the process that I would follow. Jason and I have in the search.
So let me go on. I do want to get Alan Kay's question in before we move on, but I'm going to advise everybody that I haven't even researched this area, so I'm going to read it to you all, and then I've got a couple of text messages. I've got one from Copper Dan that gives us the number of the eBay sale. You guys think about this while I'm doing these text messages, and I'll come back to you to discuss it, because I really don't have an opinion on the matter. And Alan Kay says, anyone have any thoughts on the Philadelphia caper in My War for Me? Fun fact, Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn, Forrest dad's name is William Fenn. So, and has anybody put any thought into that? And like me, I haven't even thought about it as a credible answer, but you guys go ahead and think about it for just a second. Let me get these text messages taken care of. So this is the message from Copper Dan in which he gives us the eBay item number. It's 401-606-250-281. Let me repeat that. 401-606-250-281. Okay? And then we do have, let me see, I've got a text from William in Tampa, Florida. I've listened to the logical and complex part of the panel solve, but I'm curious what part they applied imagination to their solve. Okay, we'll come back to that one because I like that question. And I've got a $20 smart chat that we have to deal with here, Jonathan, so I'm leaving it up to you. Any thoughts on the question? Anyone have any thoughts on the Philadelphia Caper in My War for Me? Fun fact, Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn. Forrest's dad's name is William Fenn. So anything with that, Jonathan?
Do you know, I haven't. I'll have a look after.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have to do that because that's where I'm at. Sean Martinez?
I'm going to have to do the same thing. You know, in regards to Philadelphia, that's the location he covered up with his thumb, correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, have any of us stopped to consider that the solution area, should you be standing where warm waters halt, you can cover up the entire thing with your thumb. I mean, it's possible that your entire solution will fit under your thumb from that starting location. So that's what comes to my mind, just based on the information I can recall in regards to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like that. You might be able to cover up your entire, if you're standing at warm water's halt, you could cover up your entire solution with a thumb. Jason, thoughts on the Philadelphia Caper?
Nothing offhand. I think it's an interesting little crook, but it's exactly the kind of thing that I actually try to stay away from. And try to keep it a little more pure and simple. Mm-hmm. And that's not to take away from, I give all credit to people who are willing to chase those kind of things down.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can't handle the complexity.
Yeah, sorry we couldn't help you more with this one, Alan. I'll tell you what, I'll give you another question because we couldn't answer that one, and maybe we can answer that. If it's 2 in a row tonight, I'll refund your super chat. Okay, so let me read this question again from William in Tampa, Florida, because I think it's a really good question and applies to what we're talking about tonight. And that is, I've listened to the logical and complex part of the panel's solve, but I'm curious what part they applied imagination to their solve. He doesn't give the alternative. He asks what part that you applied imagination, and then leaves it up to your imagination to determine what the other part that he doesn't mention is. Jonathan, let's start with you.
So my soul's completely out there, and I'm not stuck to it, so I'm looking at lots of others. But in that, my blaze was cathedral rocks sticking out the side of Bunsen Peak, and Bunsen burner, and the blaze sticking out of it. That for me was using imagination.
Mm-hmm. Sean Martinez.
I believe that imagination is essential to each of the, and this is in my opinion, each of the geographical locations that we're looking for. You know, a lot of people, when he says home of Brown, or, you know, we're looking for that, they go to very basic items opposed to utilizing their imagination sometimes. I mean, I don't believe it's going to be a Brown house. I mean, that's just very, very basic.
Or Brown Realty.
Or Brown Realty, yeah. That's that doesn't seem his style.
Mm-hmm.
But, using your imagination to figure out the different words, the different terms that are key in the poem, I believe is the best angle, and that's assisted me in determining my different locations, whether it's not far but too far to walk, or heavy loads in water high. So imagination, I think, is going to apply, if not in a very large way or great way, to each clue, but some of them may be in just a very small way. But using your imagination in that, I think, will assist the search community in going down the right path.
Okay. Jason Michael, imagination versus what?
I think absolutely. He's absolutely right. Imagination is key. There's a reason why it sounds and is written like poetry. Poetry is not about definition. It is not about absolute logic. It is about interpretation. It's about understanding, and it's about seeing the larger picture of what the combination of those words can be. And I think it's one of the things that makes it so absolutely brilliant. I mean, you can see how many years he put into this, both before he hid the treasure and after he hid the treasure, to absolutely craft this thing, because he's got every one of us absolutely enthralled and interested with this set of words. And it's not an easy thing to pull off. But to get back to his question, yeah, absolutely. I think you have to have imagination for it. And, for example, with Brown, for me, I mean, I don't think it can relate to any living or um, recently deceased Brown, because to me, it just doesn't make sense. It wouldn't stand the test of time. You'd have to have someone so unusual, like a president or a high general, to think that, hey, 600 years from now, people are going to be able to figure out who this guy's name was. So, for example, right there, you've got to use imagination to say, well, it's obviously capitalized, and to us, that's an indication of a surname, but that doesn't stand the test of time.
Right.
So, you've got to use your imagination. Where does it apply? What other things were important to him? His best friend Sloan was a painter, and Sloan clearly loved the color brown. So you start thinking about, where does that lead you? What does that create in your imagination?
I can tell you it leads to lignite deposits, having been down that.
Oh, the lignite.
Yes, the particular. That's how you get there.
I served you a softball.
So I'm going to steal Fenn's quote that he stole from Albert Einstein: imagination is more important than knowledge. And that was spoken by a scientist who spends equal amount, if you watched my show yesterday, I went through this, a scientist who spent equal amounts of his life imagining the possibilities. Energy is equal to mass accelerated to the speed of light to the square, and then the other half of that time validating it with practical experiments. And I think if you apply Einstein's approach to all of these things, that is, on one side you have imagination that enables you to imagine the possibilities that are represented by the 9 clues in the poem, and then you have to practically apply that by putting boots on the ground and either including them or excluding them and coming back with more data and start your imagination. So there's a cyclical process to this that starts by reading the poem, imagining the possibilities, implementing what you believe your imagination is telling you in terms of the practical application, and then collecting new data and imagining new possibilities. So I'm a big fan of the equal application of imagination and knowledge, and I think that's what gets us closer. I do have a super chat that we have to get to, and I'll throw it out. I'll let you guys, Shelley, let me do the super chat, and then I'll come back to you, okay? So this is from Off Trail Jaeger. He or she says, AGK, when identifying potential hints from the thrill of the chase, what consideration and interpretation do you give Forrest Fenn's comments that the hints are not intentionally placed? Thanks all. And I'm going to have to answer that last because Jaeger, you probably weren't in my room when I did my rant about hints and clues, but I'll come back to that. So let's start with you, Jonathan. When identifying potential hints from the thrill of the chase, what consideration and interpretation do you give Forrest Fenn comments that the hints are not intentionally placed?
I just take it at face value. The clues are in order in the poem. and that's really important. And the hints are just sprinkled around, so there's no knack to finding them. And I think I just take it at face value.
Okay, Sean Martinez.
Well, can you repeat the question?
I can.
I was answering another.
It's okay. When identifying potential hints from the thrill of the chase, what consideration and interpretation do you give to Forrest Fenn's comments that the hints are not intentionally placed?
Well, that makes me think about the possibility that the clues were not intentionally placed either. He found his special place. He knew where that was at. He knew where he wanted this chest to be hidden, and possibly his body. And then the clues came later. The locations were there. However, him identifying them and giving them the names in the poem that he gave them for us to follow also came later. I believe, I'm of the opinion that the clues were not intentionally placed either. And so all he had to do, knowing where he wanted his chest to be, sitting down and writing his book the way he would want to write it, he could go back through there and see different items, or possibly during writing, it would just kind of come out of him as he was going, kind of flow, just like does with writers. I mean, as he's writing, those different hints began to sprinkle themselves throughout the book, not intentionally, but it just so happened to come out of his writing skills in one particular chapter over the other. So hints, clues, neither are intentionally placed. However, later on in the poem, they are intentionally named for us to follow in an attempt to locate the treasure.
Jason Michael, do I need to repeat the question for you?
No, I totally agree with Sean, and I think given his personality as I've seen it, I think it was almost with a sense of whimsy when he'd be doing some of his memoirs and come across something and say, well, darn it, if I just write it that way, one day somebody's going to look at that passage and say, man, that was almost a direct arrow to this part of the psalm. Sure. And so, yeah, I think it first off, if you just look at the volume that he put out in the sense of memoirs and stories and everything, and secondly, the color in the stories, to do something on this scale and not end up writing something that really relates to it or points you in a direction or gives a clue would almost be impossible. It almost would have to happen. And I think it's one of the reasons why, if you'll note, when he talks about it, he doesn't say it like, I put together this huge Lego construction and a few of the blocks are placed exactly. He says it more like, and if you read through enough times, you'll find a few clues sprinkled in there, And I think that's exactly what you would say if, after having written both the original poem and a series of memoirs, that you'd look back and say, oh, wow, that actually kind of relates pretty well right there.
It does.
Okay. That reminds me,
Go ahead.
That reminds me of the possibility of there's one good clue that searchers could think of, but haven't. To Fenn, just hearing him say that would make me believe that there's something that he's thought about that, hey, this would be a really good clue for them searchers if they just figured this
figured it out.
This would put them right there for him to make a statement.
And so, just out of curiosity, because I didn't ask you this question before, is if you're of the opinion that you just described, is the clue that Fenn was thinking of in the poem or outside the poem?
I think it could be in the poem. I'm leaning more towards in the poem. And, a lot of this discussion lately over different topics within the community has really, as well as being present on Fenn Treasure Hunters when that statement came out from Fenn, it's had me thinking about it for a while and what it could be. As of right now, and this could change if something else comes along, but I'm leaning more towards in the poem, potentially parts of the poem that have been, I hate to say discluded in whole, however, by a vast majority discluded as not being, not containing clues, if that makes sense. from my perspective, first and last stanza could be key in that.
Okay. So, Shelley, I'm going to come back to you in just a moment. I'm going to give my response to this. Jaeger, I'm going to ask you to go. I kind of addressed this issue earlier in tonight's conversation. So I'm going to ask you to go read the blog post at the top of gypsyskiss.com, which is entitled "The Never-Ending Debate Between Hints and Clues." Between Forrest Fenn's hints and clues. And I've expressed my opinion. We've eliminated the conversation from our solution. We don't discuss hints and clues. We discuss credible intelligence versus incredible intelligence. Shelley, you had a question for us before we went? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting. Forgive me for that. Guys, we're going to finish up with that question. Tell me something I don't know. And I'm going to come back with that after I get Shelley's question in here. I'm sorry, Shelley.
Oh, so I had one on Facebook, but it was very similar to the one that we just answered for Off Trail. So, but he wants to know, in the 3 books, specifically The Thrill of the Chase, are there any hints that help with all 9 clues? So I don't know if you want to address that now or think about it.
Short answer, Jonathan. In The Thrill of the Chase, are there hints that address all 9 clues?
Possibly.
In your opinion?
I think I remember hearing in the video saying there were 2 really big, good clues and 2 small ones.
Aberrations around the edge is how we refer to them.
Yeah.
What do you think, Sean?
I think there's inferences throughout the book to each of the clues, some possibly more than others, depending on how difficult they would be to solve. For example, where warm waters halt, which is what most of us need to hammer down in order to get this solved.
Jason, Michael, thoughts?
It's not my bag with all those, but I will say that I don't think that there is necessarily additional hints to go with each clue directly, as if it was done with intent or relating to each one to fill them in. And then speaking to what we were talking about earlier, I do think the inference that people were missing something that was key was to the poem itself. And I do think that the suggestion that we view the learn to ride a bicycle backwards relates to that.
Oh, okay. All right. Nice.
I think we need to learn how to read the poem like that.
Okay.
And the first guy that does that is gonna have it.
All right. Jonathan, where can people find you on the internet? On the interwebs?
So I'm Brit Chaser on YouTube, and hopefully in the next few weeks you'll see a few more videos coming up.
You want to share your email in case somebody has any questions for you?
Yep, I'm Jono Jones 78. It's JONO Jones 78 at gmail.com.
Sean Martinez.
Sean Martinez, Figuring Out Forrest on YouTube, Facebook, and Figuring Out Forrest at gmail.com.
Thank you, Jason Michael.
Jason Eunice, you can find my metalwork at newmexicotinwork.com.
All right. Shelley Kearney.
And I'm at thesofterside.me.
Thank you. And let's talk a little bit about what we're doing the rest of the week. So tomorrow at 1 p.m. we have our Thursday book club, chapter 24, Dancing with the Millennium, we think in the top 5 of important chapters in the book. Then Shelley and I have our Softer Side program at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. And then on Friday, it's back to the Forrest Fenn Friday Fandango, where I'll do my best to answer your questions and take your comments about the search. So that's for the rest of the week. In the meantime, if you have a question or a comment that you'd like me to address on Friday night, you can send a text message to our 1-800 number, 1-800-943-1047, or you can leave a voicemail, and I'll play the voicemails on Friday night. And it seems like our audience likes those better because the voicemail forces you to be precise. So, and we like moving along. Okay, so here we are, end of the show. Jonathan Jones, tell me something I don't know.
I've got two great clues here that I can't go away without people hearing, but I'm going to pick one.
Okay, all right, that's good.
You don't know it. So this was from the Lure post-screening Q&A. It's a small excerpt, and to me, it kind of puts to bed the "is it buried or not" debate. So I'll just quote it directly. The clues will lead you to the treasure, and whether it's buried or not, you can find it if you find the blaze as a result of starting with the first clue. That's what you have to do. And to me, I don't know whether you've heard that one or not, but to me that means if you get it right, it doesn't matter. You'll find it either way.
Well, I did record that, but my memory goes back to about a month and a half ago, so I don't remember it. Sean Martinez, tell me something I don't know.
Oh boy.
Doesn't have to be about the chase. Tell me something I don't know about
the eastern border of New Mexico, which Clovis is about 10 minutes from Texas. And that's where I live. So the eastern border was supposed to extend further west, and essentially where I live right now, and this is when they were mapping the state, and I'm not sure if what they did on the northern border, they had to go to the Supreme Court and all of those things.
It did indeed.
The border had the same issue, and if that were the case, I would have been a Texan and lived in Texas. But
hey, wearing cowboy boots with that suit.
Is
like they do in Texas.
It was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Whenever they were mapping.
We're actually going to do a show on that whole northern New Mexican border because Colorado has a little bit more land than belongs to us New Mexicans. But it's very similar. It was just bad surveying, and they went like, okay, it's close enough for government.
I believe it was about 25 miles west we're supposed to be in. So.
Yeah,
Texas was big enough anyways.
Yeah, it's not like they need any more land.
No.
Jason Michael, tell me something I don't know.
Something you don't know. You remember the afternoon we spent an entire afternoon trying to sail through the Bay Bridge?
Yes, I do remember.
And I said that I really loved that at least we spent a day out on the boat sailing together.
Yeah, you're going to give me the bad news? What?
I was actually pissed off to my eyeballs, like stay on your side of the boat pissed off, that we didn't just put down the sail and motor through the damn bridge just to say that we did it.
Yeah.
Until we got all the way back to Annapolis and went down Ego Alley, and then that's when I could talk to you again.
Well, thank you for sharing that moment of love between son. Yeah, the Bay Bridge is it's impossible to sail through, and we wondered why everybody was motoring through. And I told Jason, we are sailing through the Bay Bridge. It's impossible because of the way the winds blow. Shelley Kearney, tell me something I don't know.
Okay. Now, you don't know this, but I'm going to offer to give Forrest back his turquoise bracelet.
Oh.
Now, all he has to do is draw me a map to exactly where it's located, and I'll go get it for him.
Oh, okay. All right. That's a good idea. I like that. I didn't know that. Good plan. We might implement it. All right, guys. Thank you very much for being a great panel tonight. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved the conversation. Learned some things, and I hope the folks in our chat room did as well. So thank you for that. To our moderators, thank you for joining us tonight and taking care of our folks in the room. And to those of you in the chat room, we know that you have a lot of choices about where you spend your time working out all the problems associated with finding this darn treasure. And we are very grateful that you choose to spend time with us. We look forward to seeing you in other of our programming, and we hope that one of you finds this treasure soon. Here's an outro for you.